Hello, everybody. Welcome to Two Way. Thank you for joining. This is 4 o'clock on Eastern, September 5th. We are going to talk about Donald Trump's economic speech. We're going to talk a little bit about where the race stands overall. And of course, as always, whether you're watching on YouTube or here on the Two Way platform, we welcome your participation in a civil way, in a way that reflects the ethos of the platform. If you're here on the Two Way platform and you want to be involved in the conversation, we'd love to have you. Please raise your electronic hand. We'll get to a lot of you and ask that if you do get called on, as always, tell us where you are, who you're supporting, what's on your mind. And we're going to start out talking to some folks overall about again the state of the race and where things stand. I'm looking now to see if John Podhoretz is here, and here he is. John did a great thing in service for America. John watched both Donald Trump on Sean Hannity last night, and then he watched the Trump economic speech today. And John, for those who don't know, is a conservative, but not a raving fan of Donald Trump. But John, I'd love for you to share with folks what you thought the third through line was in those two appearances, and why you thought they reflect a improvement for Donald Trump in terms of performance and positioning.
I've really thought that I would say pretty much since the assassination attempt that Trump has not showed focus, energy, sense of the challenge ahead of him posed by the change in the race, that he has defaulted in most of his appearance to his comfort zone priors, arguing with his own teleprompter because he wants to talk about 2020 and why Brian Kemp is bad and stuff like that, and not doing what the team had decided he ought to do. And last night on Hannity in an unscripted performance, and then today at the New York Economic Club in a scripted performance with a teleprompter, I thought we were seeing a Trump that I haven't seen in a month. Focused, relaxed, concentrated, able to answer questions that Hannity was posing to him pithily and with purpose. Of course, it's easy to answer unbelievably friendly and completely uncritical questions. So I don't really think that the degree of difficulty was particularly hard. But the speech today was interesting because he really did want the audience to believe that he would come to the presidency in 2025 with a full-bore economic agenda that was totally different and totally in contrast to what Kamala Harris, despite her efforts to pretend, in my view, to move to the center, has been promising. And the speech in that regard was good. It was the best that he can do in those circumstances, detailed about proposals focusing on energy, tax policy, making the point that the Harris and Biden proposals effectively would amount, despite how she is talking about them, to a massive tax increase if they mean that his 2017 tax cuts are allowed to sunset at the end of 2025 and are not restored or continued by the next Congress. So, for example, yesterday, Harris made a big showing of talking about how she would tax capital gains at 28%. The press then said, oh my God, this is really big. The Biden proposal is 39.6% to restore capital gains to where they were before before the Trump tax cuts. And so this is a big deal because she's veering from Biden's tax policy. But as Trump intimated, and this is the case, if the current capital gains tax rate is 20% and it goes up to 28%, that's effectively a 50% tax increase, though it may be a cut from what Biden was proposing. And so the battle will be joined between them if he can maintain this kind of focus and talk about energy and talk about what the fracking revolution, or the gold under the ground, where we have more under the ground than Saudi Arabia and Russia do put together if we just exploit it and get to it. That's a real fight. That is a fight over policy. It's not clearly a fight over policy that she wants to have, and he doesn't really want to fight over policy either, because that's not his comfort zone. He's a big picture, big personality, big I'm just going to fix everything person. But that's not going to work. I think it's pretty clear it's not going to work. And so this was the first time I thought he's in the game, or they've gotten him in the game, or he's understanding that he's got 60 days to go to get in the game. And that would be my interpretation of what happened last night and today. And of course, he can be an entirely different person tomorrow, and maybe none of this matters, because the only thing that's really going to matter is what they look like together on stage on the 10th of September on ABC, where he did something interesting. Expectation setting. We keep talking about how Harris keeps setting expectations, and then I'll stop monologuing here, because he was like, look, ABC is very unfair to me. They're really unfair to me. It's an unfair network. They're going to be unfair. They're going to be unfair. They're going to be unfair. So that's interesting, because then you think, oh, all he does is whine and complain about how everybody's unfair to him. But he is putting ABC on notice. This is a way, just putting ABC on notice, that his people are going to be watching to see whether or not the questions are balanced or unbalanced, and that his people are going to come down on them like a ton of bricks if they seem to be tilting toward Harris in the friendliness of the questions or the way they press matters. And I think that's politically canny. You can think it's bad and he's a bad person and all, whatever. I'm merely talking about performance here. And so I think his performance has been extraordinarily substandard since August. And I think this week he upped his game.
Great. John, thank you. Again, I think what you saw in his performance today, I thought more today, but certainly somewhat with Hannity, was the version of Trump that people say he needs to be. People who support Trump and have been frustrated with his lack of discipline. May not work, but it certainly was qualitatively different. John, thanks. Stay with us. So we're lucky today. I feel truly fortunate to have Kristen Davidson here. One of the most accomplished Republican strategists in the country, someone who cares about the country, is not in it for fun or for profit, but because she cares about the country, and has won races and lost races, and really understands the mechanics of politics and also the vision and purpose. So we're really grateful for you to join, and would love for you to just give your overview, because we haven't talked to you, of where you think the race stands. Is it a toss-up? Is there a favorite? And if so, why?
I would think today it's a toss-up with a slight advantage to Harris, just because we're weaning out of the honeymoon phase. So, I don't think anyone, we all talked about Joe Biden being replaced. I don't know if anyone really thought it was going to happen. I know I certainly didn't think the Democrats would coalesce as quickly as they did around her. They immediately got behind her and started rewriting her record, her policy positions, and frankly caught Republicans a little, off guard for about a month. Now I think you see the Trump campaign and Republicans really finding their footing on defining her, landing some hits on, fracking, on the border, her flip-flops. And so you see it starting to even out a little bit more. But overall, as we go into this next phase of the campaign, so we have our conventions are over, the honeymoon period's coming down, we're coming off the post-convention high for both candidates. I mean, it feels like 2 years ago that we had an assassination attempt on a former president. That's just how rapidly this cycle and this campaign has been changing. Now we're kind of starting a little bit even. I mean, to me, what this race really is going to be about is who is the change candidate. And so remarkably, Kamala Harris has been able to come across as a candidate of change, even though she's the sitting vice president. But you look at that CNN poll that came out yesterday showing, Trump leading in Arizona, tied in I believe, Nevada and Georgia, or Pennsylvania, and then Wisconsin and Michigan are a little, Kamala has a lead there. But more importantly than the ballot, to me, there's a question that says, who can bring the type of change the country needs? And it's really, the only state that Trump is the clear candidate of change is Arizona, which is the state that he had the highest lead on the ballot as well. Georgia is split. Georgia thinks that both Harris and Trump are the candidate of change. Michigan, more voters think Harris is the candidate of change. Nevada, Trump has a slight advantage. Pennsylvania, it's about even. And in Wisconsin, more voters think Harris is the candidate of change. And so I think as we approach the next inflection point of this campaign, which is going to be the debate, the task of the Trump campaign is to take back that change mantle. It's, we have the sitting vice president who right now it's a tie for which candidate is going to bring change. This is a change election. Trump needs to take back that mantle, show that Harris has really been part of the problem for the last 4 years and that he can bring the type of change the country needs. And I think that's what needs to happen. Whichever candidate can succeed on that, on taking that, winning that question. And it's one that I'm going to be watching in every single poll, and I hope every single outlet asks it, is really going to kind of show us where this race is going.
The other question I look at besides change, which was also in that poll, is whose policies reflect your values, who shares your values, and who's in the mainstream. I think those are basically roughly the same. And again, she's even or ahead in whose policies are in the mainstream versus whose policies are dangerous to America. I think if you work in Mar-a-Lago or you live in rural North Carolina, you find the notion that anyone would say Kamala Harris to that to be galling, and yet she's ahead there. And I think if you want to define the success of the convention in Chicago, their advertising, how they've protected her and shaped her image, is they've made her seem very much mainstream and not dangerous in her policies. And so if you're thinking about it from the Trump campaign's point of view, is that something that they need to do better on? And if so, how do they do that? Besides the debate, how do they start in the 7 states? How do they try to make people think she is and her policies are out of the mainstream?
It's a consistent message that needs to be top down. It needs to be narrow. We can't be all over the place. I think there was one video that came out that had 100 things that she said that she's flipped on. That's too much to digest. Stick to fracking, stick to the economy, stick to the border. There are, 3 to 4 things, and drill it home in every single thing that they're saying on TV, in speeches, have the down ballot candidates doing the same. I mean, the Harris campaign is doing something, they're getting criticized right now about not doing enough interviews. That's all part of the strategy. And so we need to stop whining about it and just go and take advantage. If we're going to go on every Sunday show, every Sunday, we should be talking about the 3 to 4 things that Kamala Harris is dangerous on, frankly. And it's the border, it's fracking, it's cost of living, it's healthcare. I mean, just hammer them home every single time and not get distracted by the different things of the race. That just and this campaign has been, more disciplined than I think we've seen the other Trump campaigns. I think the team has done a very good job of, keeping to a message. Now it's a different race. The race that we were in 2 months ago is different. And so we just need to change the message and drill it home every single day, not worry about what she's doing, because she right now is doing something that other opponents have not, which is frankly ignore. She's ignoring the Trump campaign, ignoring the slights, ignoring the press, and it could work for her because she doesn't want to have to go and have to answer the hard questions. If she goes on CNN last night, they're going to ask her in the segment, well, why did you flip on your position on asylum for migrants? And she's not going to be able to answer it. So their strategy is probably the same that Biden had in 2020, which is just to keep her away from the press. If the Trump campaign is going to be aggressive with it, don't worry about how many interviews she's doing. We have her on tape. She's on tape saying these things. She's on tape saying that she wants to ban fracking. That's going to be detrimental in a state like Pennsylvania, which I think the election will probably come down to. And so drill it home every single day and don't get off message. That's really what Republicans need to do.
Thank you. I want to ask you about 2 advantages they have. One is money. She put out her fundraising numbers today for the campaign and for the associated committees. She continues to be a phenomenon at raising money, both large checks and small, and then also about early vote. So stand by for that. Again, folks, if you want to get in, incredible opportunity to ask Kristen questions about any aspect of the race, please raise your hand. We're going to go to your questions in just a minute. You've worked in campaigns where your side has had more money and you've been on the downside of that. Some people say it's not that big an advantage because it's 7 states and they're all going to be saturated. and other people say, there's so many ways to spend money in the digital age that it's a decided advantage. Which side of that do you come down on?
I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I don't even think it's 7 states. I think it's probably 3. I think it's Pennsylvania, Georgia, and then Arizona or Nevada. They kind of interchange. I think those are where the resources, and not just the monetary resources, the human resources, the boots on the ground, that type of infrastructure.
Let me stop you a second. Does that mean you assume that if it's a close race, it doesn't mean Trump can't win Michigan and Wisconsin, or Harris can't win North Carolina, but you assume if it's a close race that Trump wins North Carolina and she wins Michigan and Wisconsin? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. And so you're talking about 3 to 4 states, and really probably 50 to 70,000 people within those states that are swing voters. And so right now, I don't necessarily think the money advantage. I think you can make it work even if you're on the other side of that, where you are, on our side where we don't have as much resources, because we can spend smarter. We know who we need to talk to. We need to invest in data and focus on who they are. Both bases are excited. We don't have a base problem. Our folks are ready to go. They are excited. If they weren't before the unfortunate, tragic assassination attempt, they definitely were after. And Democrats weren't. Now Democrats are. So we don't have a base problem. We do have people in the middle who are undecided or might change their vote, or who are voting for RFK, or frankly just depressed at their choices. And so we know who they are. We know how they get the information. And it might not be on broadcast TV. It's probably on Hulu or Roku or streaming. And so for the campaign to be smarter, I don't think they necessarily have to have more money. They have to spend smarter. And they have to know who they're talking to and know who the message is. They have to know the suburban mom outside of Atlanta who's going to be upset about Kamala Harris's record on crime. They need to be able to go. So to me, it's not necessarily, the resource advantage or disadvantage isn't detrimental to me. It's just the targeting, the data, and who we're talking to and how we're talking to them.
What about the money not as something you can spend, but as a reflection of energy and excitement? I mean, we've never seen, it depends on how you quantify it, but we've never seen anyone raise money like this. And obviously part of it is a burst of excitement and relief that they're no longer saddled with a nominee who appeared doomed. But obviously pollsters ask about intensity. You said your side is fired up after the assassination attempt, but isn't it possible that between abortion and whatever is driving the donations that she's getting, that your side could be swamped? Could be swamped?
It could be. I don't know if that's every poll you see, the intensity, it's 82% to 83% of that's where we're at. So 82% of Trump voters are extremely motivated to turn out, and 83% of Harris voters. So it's close on the motivation front. Democrats have been more successful on the small dollar front. It's been documented. There's no denying this. I think right now there are 9 million Democrat small donors to 4 million Republican. And so that's a bigger problem. That's where I think we'll see that play out this time. It's not a direct result of the excitement behind Harris. I don't think it's telling that. It just means Democrats have built the small dollar machine better and earlier than Republicans did. And it's a problem that's going to take us probably 2 or 3 cycles to fix, because right now we're going back to the same 4 million people over and over again. I do think the Trump campaign's doing a good job of finding those Trump voters who otherwise wouldn't participate in the political process. They need to convert those to donors, which I know that they're doing. But I wouldn't say necessarily that the fundraising is a direct result of the enthusiasm so much as they have been investing more in the small dollar than Republicans have for a lot longer. I think right now Democrats, if you would have talked to a Democrat 2 months ago, it was, let's just try to hold on to the Senate, maybe hold on to the House. It was a very dire time. And people who kept their pockets closed for 2 years are just excited that it's someone that's not named Joe Biden. So I think you'll see that wane a little bit. They will always have the advantage on small dollar. It's just where we're going to be at for a cycle or two until Republicans can catch up on that. On the abortion front, I think abortion will probably have an impact in states where it's on the ballot. I think that's where you'll see more of that play out. There are a lot of states where, you look at Pennsylvania and Nevada and New Mexico, and the Senate candidates there have been on the air basically saying they're against a national ban. They think abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. Republicans have been way more proactive. We made the mistake in 22 of dismissing the abortion fight. We thought cost of living would outweigh it, that it wouldn't have an impact. And obviously, when the red wave didn't happen, we learned from that. And so now I think you've seen Republican and frankly, Trump as well. I mean, back in the primary in 2023, he was getting hit from all sides for not being conservative enough on the abortion issue. So Trump has made huge strides bringing the party to a certain spot on that issue, basically to take it off the table, because it's the people who are motivated to vote on that issue are probably motivated to vote for their party's nominee anyway right now. And so I don't think it's going to be a huge issue because we don't have too many candidates down the ballot who are going to say something to throw it off or are not going to be in lockstep with where Trump is and where the campaign is. And I think that part, it's been interesting to me, the Democrat candidates that I see leaning into the abortion argument, I don't think they know where else to go right now, but in every data point that I see, it's not a top 3 issue and it's not a motivating issue. As long as we don't say something to really mess us up, circa, like Todd Aiken or Richard Murdoch, what was that, 2010? I think we'll be able to survive and advance there. It's going to be it's going to come down to who they trust to actually bring change on the key issues that are happening right now.
I want to ask you one more abortion question and then ask you about early vote. You worked, as the sign behind you suggests, for Governor Youngkin, a pro-life candidate who got elected in a state that's at this point more pro-choice than pro-life. Although obviously there are a lot of pro-life voters. What are the lessons of Youngkinism for winning in a state which had elected a lot of pro-choice people, but some pro-life? What can you draw from his ability to navigate that in Northern Virginia and elsewhere in the state where people are pro-choice?
Right. Well, I think we also, to be totally fair, that was a pre-Roe decision campaign, so it wasn't as hot at the time.
Yeah.
But we did a lot of testing on the forefront just to see, like, during the primary, which issue would be, more detrimental in a general election, and the abortion issue wasn't it. So we were okay kind of talking through it. But, part of it's candidate quality. I mean, Governor Youngkin is a really once in a generational talent. And so he's able to kind of communicate his position and not offend others. But also it's really bringing people to, a lot of it's tone and a lot of it is a general approach to respect on it, where if we have a different issue, I'm not, that's okay. Here's where I'm at. And he said his position very early on. He didn't apologize for it and he didn't waver. That's the thing. When you see candidates kind of go forward and backward on an issue, and one day they're pro-life, the next day, I don't know, and the next day they're pro-choice, that's when people start to get a little uncomfortable. If you can say where you're at and not demonize your opponent for it and agree that you can respect each other's positions, and I'm not going to totally upend your life and you're not going to hold it against me, you can usually navigate the bumpy waters of Northern Virginia. And that's what Governor Youngkin was able to do so well.
Yeah. Kristen, you and your firm are as good as anybody at understanding how to get people to turn out and the mechanics of, have they voted, if they haven't gotten a ballot in yet, staying on them. Donald Trump is a very formidable candidate. You know that. You've lost to him. You've watched him do well. It's comical how much he's undermined the capacity of Chris LaCivita and others to bank early vote. He continues, even lately, even though he's supposed to be on message here, he continues to suggest voting early is for the devil, and it could be the entire election. So how do you appraise, first, not the mechanics of the party and the campaign? I want to ask you that, but how do you appraise the culture of your party's voters? Are people primed to vote absentee, early, by mail, drop box, or is that still something that people look at in a very negative way that could cost your side?
So this is a state by state issue for sure, and I think that's how it should be approached, because we really need to run governor's races on an early vote approach in all these states. I think whatever President Trump is going to say or not doesn't affect it as much. It comes down to what the culture is in each state. So Virginia is a great example. Governor Youngkin launched his campaign, I think, 2 weeks after January 6th. And so obviously early vote, there are 45 days of early vote in Virginia. So it's a big deal in order to win. And from the beginning, just from it's a two-pronged approach, ensuring that the election is going to be safe, whether that be election poll workers or watchers, or in Virginia in 2021, we had a hotline that people could call and report things if they didn't, they were worried their ballot wouldn't make it. And we had basically a concierge service of early vote. that gave people that first, relief or permission slip to actually consider voting early. And then we enthusiastically embraced it. And we had, the candidate go and do events at early vote sites and then walk with people to go vote, and made it part of an overall campaign strategy. But the first step was getting people to feel comfortable with it and secure. We had an election integrity task force that people literally got a membership card, that they were part of this. We have to make sure our elections are safe and secure. Then they felt comfortable to compete in that. That's what you see in Florida. That's what you see in Georgia. That's what you see in some of these other states. And so that's what's really going to need to happen here. It's not so that's not something that Trump himself can do. That's something that's going to happen in every single state. So that needs to be something that, the McCormick campaign has to do in Pennsylvania, and the Moreno campaign has to do in Ohio. And, the Brown campaign has to do in Nevada. Each one of these states, when you're there living day to day, minute to minute, it is that type of thing to develop that culture. And it doesn't necessarily matter so much what Trump says, but to have that ingrained. And the first step is making sure that voters are comfortable and secure and almost hand holding them through the process. So call us if you have an issue. Call us if you're worried about the drop box, and having a team ready to answer those calls and walk them through to make sure their ballot's secure. I mean, because when we did this in 21, Glenn Youngkin won the in-person early vote. That's why he won the election. Because once then the mail vote came in, the election day came in, we were already at a lead to survive it. And so that's what all these states are going to have to do. It shouldn't be 100% on Trump. I think that is part of his brand. That's what he's done so well since 2016, is being able to kind of tap into certain sentiments. But it's really going to be the responsibility of the people on the ground, and it is a mechanical thing. It is something that you have to start day to day and make it part of your everyday culture.
So when you look at Chris LaCivita, the RNC, the other folks who are trying to build not just the mechanics, but to foster the culture, they say, even though we started later than the other side, even though we're up against the culture of the last few cycles, even though we have less money, we're going to do this. We're not going to lose this on early vote. What are the questions you ask, or the things you'd look at this point before data starts coming in to test that proposition? What makes you think either they are ready to compete there, or maybe they're not? What do you look at?
So I would probably look at the boots on the ground, and just how many likely early voters they're targeting in each state. You know who these people are. You can model them. You can see their vote history. You know who to go after. That's who you go after first. Get them to bank, especially if with this cycle, how things have changed so fast. You want a supporter to go bank their vote early in case something else changes, right? So I think the things that I would look at, how many people do you have on the ground devoted to this? And then how many people are you targeting? If the answer to that is, I don't know, then you probably have some work to do. But in places like Pennsylvania, which again, I think is ground zero for the whole election, early, some ballots start going out next week. I mean, we're rolling, we're voting. And so to know who the likely people are, where in the state they are, is so important to me. And knowing that those numbers, it's a knowable number, is kind of the first sign of whether you're ready to go or not.
Yeah. Again, if you want to get in, please get your hand up. I'm about to go to you folks. A bunch of people have their hands up. We'll go to you in a moment. In some cycles, it's clear who's got the technological edge, right? In 2012, the Romney technology crashed on election night, and clearly the Obama people invested a lot in there. We've had cycles where the Republicans were ahead, where the Democrats are ahead. Thinking about the Trump campaign versus the Harris campaign, the RNC versus DNC, these state parties, does one side have a technological advantage now in terms of the kind of stuff we're talking about, integrating digital with early vote, get out the vote on election day, or do you not know, or are they both state of the art as far as you can tell?
I think they're probably both advanced for the party, respectively, as we are now. And this is going to be, criticizing the ground game or the field and nitpicking is probably the easiest thing to do, because none of us sitting here can actually go into Pennsylvania and see how many doors they're knocking or how many county leaders they have and all that. So I'm not going to do that. But I do think that, the Democrats had the advantage of inheriting Biden's infrastructure. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of boots on the ground that they didn't have to go build. They just inherited it. The Trump campaign is doing a little bit different. Some of it is outsourced to super PACs, which can be tricky, but can also be successful and a huge burden off the campaign financially. And then, kind of taking the approach that we saw them take during the Iowa caucus, which was identifying people who were Trump voters only and wouldn't otherwise participate unless they had direct outreach from the campaign. And so it's a creative strategy, and we saw it work for them, obviously winning Iowa by 50 points. And we'll see if that can translate into these other states in partnership with what the super PACs are doing. But, they are starting, at least a mile or two behind, just because Biden had 3 years to build it, and Harris inherited it.
Yeah. Okay, you two don't have identical names, but I bet you both had your first and last names spelled incorrectly like the other ones. So appropriate to start with Christine Davies, who is a Virginia Republican. And where are you currently going to cast your ballot?
In Maryland, actually. I've gone
in Maryland. Okay. All right, you've gone to the dark side. You live closer to Rockville than you do to Williamsburg.
That's
maybe.
right. Formerly Charlottesville.
And you're a Republican, but you're going to vote for who in the general?
I'm going to vote for Harris at this point. Trump just has not done enough to convince me that he's kind of come to the sane side, unfortunately. So,
okay.
But I did,
Mark, question for Kristen.
Yeah, thanks so much. I did want to ask Kristen a question, kind of building on your point about tactics or mechanics. And I'm curious, Kristen, I've heard that the Republican Party, even more than just having to get focused on early voter turnout, which of course is getting more and more important in these election cycles, is also really changing the way that they're profiling voters. My understanding of the Karl Rove School was you really went after high propensity voters. You tried to touch them at least 7 times. It was all about doing everything you could to get them to vote, whether early, or on election day, just to really make sure that group got to the polls. But it sounds like James Blair has kind of adopted more of a strategy where the RNC is profiling lower propensity voters. And they're somehow doing it, with folks that maybe haven't been voting as much, but they're somehow profiling them to be in line with Trump values, and they're spending their money so that even if they're going to be fewer touchers, of those voters, they're still hoping that, I guess, the broader spread approach is what's going to help, deliver the bigger margin that he needs. So I'm just curious if I'm understanding that correctly, if you think it's a smart strategy, and especially if you have any insight into how they're finding kind of that sweet spot of maybe it's low propensity, high enthusiasm voters this cycle.
Right.
Great question. Good.
Really good. Thank you. I think that there are phases of the campaign. So, I think probably right now they're still in the persuasion phase to get people to consider to vote. Really, the high propensity, and I don't want to mischaracterize the Rove School as you said it, but your GOTV is going to be to go after those, the supporters who are lower propensity. So that's the target. That's back in the day, it was 72 hours. Now in states like Virginia and Pennsylvania, it's 50 days, 45 days. But you really do, with early vote, need to kind of run dual tracks. You have to keep persuading. You have your high propensity voters who are undecided or potentially soft on either candidate. You have to keep working that persuasion at least through Columbus Day to try to win those guys, because they're definitely voting. And so you have to try to, convince them, while at the same time looking at your low propensity supporters and start GOTVing them now, frankly. And I have a sense that that's what the Trump campaign is doing, just from what I read, that they're looking at these low propensity supporters, people who probably haven't voted since 2020 or even 2016, and getting them to turn out now. And I hope they can get them to turn out early. So if they're in Pennsylvania and they're talking to people who haven't voted since 2016, go have them get their absentee ballot and send it in and be done. Get that voter in the door. That's going to be the way to do that, while you need to go over here. And again, and Pennsylvania is just such an easy state to use as an example because there's so many different things. But as you're banking that, low propensity supporter in Northeast Pennsylvania, in Luzerne County, you need to also be working in Bucks County. That's that undecided voter who maybe doesn't really want to vote for Trump, but really can't vote for Harris. So it's dual tracks, and they have to be able to do both now in the world that we live that has a longer early vote period.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Great question. Thank you. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, just a quick follow-up was just, do you have any insight into how they are doing that profiling? Because I would imagine that high propensity or propensity in general is based on election participation. So how are they vetting who these low propensity but potential Trump voters, or in the Harris campaigns, Harris voters would be?
That I don't know. That I don't know. I would, if I were them, I would assume it is a mix of voter history as well as, a modeling of the state to see what their, position is on it now. But I don't know what they're doing specifically.
Maybe folks who are showing up at local elections or stuff like that.
Right. Well, if they're focusing on people who haven't voted since 2016, it's really going to be a mix of, have they ever voted absentee before? Have they voted before? And then kind of doing a, dialing out to 1,000 people in the state and modeling like voters.
Thanks so
Great.
much.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's bring in Ray. Ray, some folks, because we're growing fast, don't know you. So tell folks where you are, who you are, and ask away.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ray Marcano. I'm a journalist from Ohio. I write a weekly column for a number of different places, including at the Dayton Daily News. And I've just got 3 quick points that I'm happy to hear any pushback or feedback. I too watched the Trump economic speech today, and the one thing that I was struck by was, yeah, his message was okay, but he simply looked old and tired. And it occurred to me that it would seem to be hard to make a change argument when you look like you're completely disinterested. And he did look disinterested in a number of points during that speech, at least to me. Secondly, the drop box and getting people early is interesting, but some of the Senate and House candidates are going to be sabotaged by people in their own party. For example, here in Ohio, Frank LaRose, the Republican Secretary of State, just came out yesterday and says he wants to ban all drop boxes. You're only allowed one in every county in Ohio anyway. But so he comes out yesterday and sends the message that these things aren't safe. It's not going to hurt Trump. It's going to hurt Moreno, who's already behind. And lastly, we hear a lot about Kamala Harris not doing interviews, and I take a different tact on that. She is doing interviews. She's just doing them on social media and in ways that we don't see, and in ways that a lot of pollsters aren't going to get. So, for example, when Charlie XCX, the big pop star, puts out on her Twitter account and TikTok, when she's got millions of people, that Kamala Harris is the real brat. That's the name of her new album, by the way, not that Kamala Harris is a brat. That goes a long way, and I think it goes a long way in ways that we don't see. When she does interviews with TikTok moms and other moms on their YouTube channels, that goes a long way, and I just don't think we see it. Thanks, Mark.
Is she actually doing interviews like that?
Oh, yeah, she did a couple during the DNC. Matter of fact, she invited, one was with a North Carolina mom who, don't hold me to the number, but I think she had more than like 3 million subscribers, and she invited somebody to actually give a speech that nobody saw at the DNC.
But those are the ones I've seen or heard about are pretty short. They're not really interviews. They're kind of exchanges, right? Thank you, Ray. Kristen, you want to pick up on any of that? Please do.
Yeah, I think on the last point, when you run campaigns, every candidate is going to say, I need to go do TikTok. I need to get out there on social media. What is my Twitter doing? Again, it's not real life per se. When you do a TikTok with a rapper who has I had to Google what brat was. I mean, maybe I'm getting old. I don't really know, but I had to Google what it was because I had no idea. Now I'm all about it. But it took me a while to figure it out. And, that's where most Americans are. They don't know. My parents live in Northeast Pennsylvania. They're swing voters. They don't know what Twitter is. They don't know what Facebook is. And so you kind of have to go meet the voter where they are. And so maybe, when she does the TikTok interviews and the X interviews and the Facebook interviews and the YouTube, that's to reach a certain demographic, but it's missing the large swath of who's going to vote. And that's that 55 and plus. They're still going to make up a larger chunk of the electorate than the 18 to 35. And so she's not doing, and plus when you're in those situations, she's not answering hard questions. I mean, there's not going to be, a social media icon or an Instagram influencer isn't going to ask her why she changed her position on asylum for migrants. They're just not. They're going to ask her what she had for breakfast. And so really doing those hard interviews, and I'm not, if I were her campaign, I'm not saying I would have her do them. I mean, she's getting away with it. She could really hold her breath for 60 days, not answer one tough question outside the debate. And that's a strategy. And it might be very smart. Some could say that maybe you overexpose yourself and do too many interviews, because then you end up saying, something that gets a headline and annoys some people and gets them upset. On the on the Dropbox part, I think, I don't know too much what they've done, but I think as long as they can, if the Moreno team and the Trump team can shuffle people into where the drop boxes are, it is easier to manage 1 than 10. And that does make people a little bit more secure about knowing that it's just going to one place rather than 10. And oh, by the way, one is over here and no one ever watches it. One of the things we did in Virginia was actually have, watchers at these drop boxes that gave people a lot of security to know that, no one was going to run away with the ballots. So I'm not entirely sure that it'll have a negative effect. It could have a positive if they're organized enough to do it.
Ray, thank you. Appreciate it. Jack, welcome in. Tell everybody who doesn't know where you are, who you're supporting, say what's on your mind. Question for Kristen.
Hi all, I'm Jack. I'm born and raised in New York City, but I go to Stanford University in California, so I'll be voting there this cycle. On my mind, and I'll be voting for Trump, or really against Harris. My question is, I don't know if you know the 13 keys to the White House, the Alan Lichtman system. He called the election for Harris today. He said 3 to 5 keys are false. I think really 5 of them are false, given the foreign policy disasters of the Biden-Harris administration. But I was wondering, Mark and Kristen, if you had any thoughts on his system, whether or not it's kind of just a total fantasy, and how that really should, color our insight into this election. Because if you look at the Biden numbers, they are only 4 false keys, and I don't see any logical person who would say that Biden had a better chance of winning than Harris did. I mean, considering he was non-compos mentis for most of it.
So, Kristen, another way to ask that is if your choices were Nate Silver, Ouija board, or Alan Lichtman, how would you rank those in terms of likelihood of getting the outcome right?
Yeah. Oh, that's tough. I don't know. I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could, especially now. I feel like we broke this cycle in particular has just broken all of that. I think we're in, I think maybe Johnson might have been the last time we had a similar type of election where, you have the top of the ticket stepping down. There have just been so many things that, and I truly believe that our polling industry, not just Republicans, but, the major news networks and Democrat, where a lot of these, not the Rickman theory, but Nate Silver and everyone else, I don't think we've figured out polling in a cell phone world. I just don't think we figured it out yet. We saw it in 2016. We saw it in 2020. Now, I'm not a poll truther or denier. You see a lot of consultants go on Twitter and say, this is why this poll isn't right. I'm not going to do that. It's just not worth it. But I do think it is healthy to understand that we, as an industry, have not totally figured out when people are not living with landlines anymore. Like I've never had a landline in my adult life, ever. I have a cell phone. I have, and I'm getting up there in the age bracket.
How do you get your faxes? Just kidding.
Exactly. And so we have to be, when you have, Nate Silver, who I respect, I think he's a very smart guy. But when you have him kind of basing that on the polls that these select different outlets are doing, you got to take it with a grain of salt. They're not going to be totally correct. It's more looking at a trend. I do think that the earthquake theory has been wrong once, and that was 2000. I think he'd probably argue that he was right and, it didn't work out, but nothing is 100%. And so I think it's for those of us who are nerds about this and do it for a living and love it. It's very interesting. And I think there are a lot of fundamentals there that are worth looking at, but I don't think any predictor right now is going to be correct just because there have been so many abrupt changes in this election just over the last 2 months for me to believe any prediction right now.
Yeah, I agree with exactly what Kristen said. And I'll just add the thing about Lichtman, again, he had a lot of success, but the variables that will decide this very unusual election, I don't think are susceptible to the kind of factors he does. If it stays close, and I still think somebody could win all 7 of the battleground states, or 5 of them, or 6 of them. But the variables involved here they just don't lend themselves to his kind of formulaic analysis of data in, data out. That in theory allows him to say, well, she's going to win. She might win, and he might be right, but I don't think it'll be because of the inputs that he put into his creaky machinery.
Yeah, I thought it was funny that he and Nate Silver had their little Twitter squabble a couple of weeks ago, and he called him a glorified accountant.
Which one called the other one a glorified accountant, because I think they're both glorified accountants.
Lichtman called Silver a glorified accountant because
Yeah.
Silver was saying, your system makes no sense. Biden is basically dead. How could he have a better chance than Harris? And obviously, there's the
Right.
incumbency key. So technically, Biden would have a better chance. And Lichtman says, I'm a historian. You're a clerk or something,
Yeah.
a glorified
Yeah.
accountant.
I would happily hire either of them as my accountant. I'll say that. Jack, thank you for coming back. Grateful to you. Mr. Cole, tell everybody where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind.
Well, I'm in California and I'm supporting Harris. We've been talking a lot about wavering on abortion, that Trump has done a bit of that, and, Kamala moving to the center. But I am struck recently that Trump appears to be wavering on the 2020 stolen election theory. And I just wonder who he's aiming for. I assume people who are concerned about January 6th will not believe him, but I am curious about what people who believed every word he said would now think about him saying, oh, I lost by a whisker, I came close. What's going on with that?
Well, I haven't heard those comments, but what I would assume is, a lot of Americans, when they say the election was stolen, I don't think that a lot of Americans think that Democrats went and picked it up and left. I think, which is probably true, that a lot of these Democrat states manipulated some of the COVID regulations and laws that made it easier for Democrats to win. And so I think both probably could be the same, that you could think that, the votes that came in and Joe Biden was legitimately elected, but also Democrats manipulated some of these states to make the voting easier for Democrat candidates. But I don't, I think this has to be a windshield election, not a rear view mirror for, if we're talking about a change election. And so I don't necessarily see January 6th or 2020 as being that relevant to this campaign or to this election. I don't think if you're voting, if January 6th is your issue and you're voting, you're probably sitting in California and voting for Kamala Harris. It's just, you're not going to be a swing voter. They're not looking at that. They're looking at, the cost of living. They're looking at crime. They're looking at the border. They're looking at the middle class. Those are going to be bigger issues. There's a reason why Kamala Harris didn't go there. She hasn't talked about it. She literally doesn't bring it up.
But why is Trump talking about it? He is talking about it. He's done 2 or 3 comments in the last couple of days where he's acknowledging that Biden had more votes than he did, whereas he used to be all about election being stolen is a lot different than monkeying around with process questions.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think I assume he's probably looking forward to the windshield and winning the election.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cole. Sorry about that. Michelle, welcome in. Tell everybody where you are, if they don't know who you're supporting, and ask away. There you go. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Try one more time. Michelle, there you go. Try unmuting. If it doesn't work, we'll cycle somebody else in. And no. Michelle, keep working on that. One of my colleagues will jump in with you. I'd love to get you back, but let's go to Warren. Warren, again, for folks who don't know, tell them where you are, who you're supporting. Tell us what's on your mind.
I live in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. I vote in Florida, where I spent some time. I am also a veteran, a Vietnam combat veteran. I have a question about the veteran vote, and specifically Pennsylvania. I was surprised to learn that Pennsylvania has the 4th largest number of veterans of any state in the country, some 650,000 veterans. Also, in reading part of Project 2025, that infamous project or famous project, there is proposed cuts in veterans' disability benefits, maybe even for current veterans. It's not quite clear. My question is, can the Harris campaign target that group in Pennsylvania specifically and make some progress? Noting that if you pick up 3 points worth of the veteran vote there, that's 20,000 votes in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's a huge group, and obviously, as you point out, very big in Pennsylvania. Kristen, what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Warren. Thank you for your service and for the question. I think they can. I think the thing I haven't understood with the Harris campaign is how they keep talking about Project 2025. No one really knows what that is. I've never read it. I don't know what it is. I don't, subscribe to it. What they should do instead, and I hate giving them advice here, but it's just pick out things like that and just say this is what Trump wants to do, and then have a really fine print that it's Project 2025. But they're around there saying, oh, Trump's Project 20, because Trump has been very, very vocal and adamant that he has nothing to do with this. He doesn't support it. He's against it. Republicans down the ballot haven't even read it. And look, this is a conservative group that they put out these types of products all the time. It's not a binding thing. It's not part of the Trump campaign. And so, but if I were Harris, I would stop saying Project 2025. They sound almost as fringe as what they're claiming to be. They just need to talk about what they're claiming Trump wants to do and go with it. And that, I think they could probably be more effective doing that way. The second thing is Pennsylvania has a lot of, we're smaller in number now, but a lot of blue dog Democrats, and some of them are veterans. Go find some of them to help lead that effort. The most effective thing is going to have a neighbor tell a neighbor, or a veteran tell a veteran, that this is what's going to happen. And the flip side, Trump campaign needs to do that too. That neighbor to neighbor validator is going to be so important on issues like that when you're trying to break into a voting bloc that doesn't usually go for your party or candidate.
Warren, thank you. Kristen, I want to respectfully push back to you on Project 2025, because I thought exactly what you said until about a month ago. And I don't know if you've done any qualitative work on this, but I swear to you, it is people come on this platform all the time and they say it. They can't tell you what's in it with much specificity, although occasionally they know one or two stuff. But I guarantee you that if Harris wins in these post-election sessions, they're going to tell you this was an emotional, powerful way, shorthand way to communicate with voters. They don't know what's in it. They don't care if you tell them Trump has disavowed it. They don't care if you say it's the Heritage Foundation, it's not the campaign. They know the word. They associate it primarily with abortion rights and this concept of extremism. And I'm telling you, I may be wrong, because again, this is mostly a qualitative thing. But I have found, since I was disabused of this, and I know from talking to Democratic pollsters who work for the campaign, they think this is a legit, real thing. You're right on the merits in the sense that it's unfair. Like, Trump should be no more held accountable for this than Harris should for everything Bernie Sanders has ever said, right? But go talk to Democrats, and I think you'll find, I may be wrong, but I think you'll find they really know it. And it doesn't matter he's disavowed it. It doesn't matter they can't recite from it. They just know that there's this thing that's extreme, that's Trump's secret plan, and he must be stopped.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. There's got to be some data out there, or else they wouldn't be doing it. But where I stop short of getting to where you are is they have to. Branding is tough. It takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of time. They have to focus on doing that for Kamala. Now they're going to try to brand this whole other thing. I just am skeptical that the actual tagline Project 2025 itself is as effective as just saying Trump wants to do this.
Yeah. Did you read the Washington Post story on this today?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So go read it. And again, I thought this before. The Washington Post has a great story today that talks about John Oliver and people on social media. In other words, what you just said, if they were starting from scratch, that they had to make voters say, hey, have you heard of this thing? The pop culture of the left, which of course is massive, has already branded this for months as a thing. So the campaign is not trying to create an awareness and say, you need to know about 2025, this is a Trump thing. They're playing in a very fertile area where people have already heard about it from HBO and social media. And I'm telling you again, it's related to abortion rights, but it's unlike anything I can recall. I cannot recall an analog like this. But read the Post story. Hopefully you are on the right side of the Post paywall.
Yeah,
I'm sure you are. Go read it. It reinforced my view that this is integral to their firing people up. And we talk all the time on this platform about, can you define Trump as something new? Everybody says it's baked in the cake. Everybody knows him. They know his strengths and weaknesses. They've already decided. And there's some people in Trump world and even some Democratic consultants who participate here who say, you can think about Trump new. For instance, at the convention, when his granddaughter spoke, And she said, he calls me up during the school day and asks me back off. That was new, right?
Right.
So although they haven't followed through on it, we haven't heard much about Grandpa Donald lately, but this is demonizing him with something new. It's not just more of what we had from 2021 to 2020, or from 2017 to 2021. It's Trump's back with a new secret plan, and it's
Right.
even more evil and worse. And
Right.
I'm telling you, the awareness of it is great. Where do you get to? You live in Texas, right?
No. I'm actually in Virginia, but
In Virginia. Okay. Yeah. So you have access to Democrats. Go to Soul Cycle or Whole Foods.
Gotta go to Starbucks, and then we're fine.
Starbucks. Just next time you're in a place in Virginia with Democrats, just say, hey, what do all y'all think of Project 2025? And I'm telling you, it'll be like saying, what do you think of Steve Bannon? They'll know it. And
it's going to be, yeah, no, I'm definitely going to, it's one of those things where in 2022, we all kind of thought, okay, is abortion can't be that big of a thing. It's not going to be a thing. It could be that same thing where it is, and it's happening, and it's not picking up for us. I did think it was wild that, I first saw Democrats pushing this after the sad Biden-Trump debate back in June. Their first response to that debate was, we're going right here. And all of us were wondering, well, what's happening? I mean, their candidate is literally falling asleep on stage. Why are they going to talk about 2025? I feel like they need to do better than that. But like I said, I can't imagine that they would be putting so much behind it if they didn't have data showing it worked. But it is, I don't know what else Trump could do except disavow it. Right. And that's what they're doing.
And of course, this is a classic example of having the home court advantage with the media is such a big edge, right? Because if this were a Republican attempt at a Democrat, you'd see story after story about how it's been disavowed and how there's this vast right-wing conspiracy to tag Kamala Harris with this plan of, the Center for American Progress that's not her plan and that she's disavowed. That's what the coverage would be like. But that's not what the coverage is like, right? The coverage is about how all the ties between, how J.D. Vance wrote the foreword, and that's how all the coverage is. So the coverage is not debunking the connection. The coverage is looking for every possible connection. And to be fair, there are connections, right? There are idea connections. There are connections like J.D. Vance. There's 1,000 connections between Trump and the Heritage Foundation. There are 1,000 connections between Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders, but the press isn't going to frame things those ways. So, like I said, I was haunted by the way you described it, because that's exactly what I was saying on this platform like a month ago. And I no longer think it. And again, I'm not singling you out, because I know a lot of Republican strategists feel the way you do, but I think it's a huge blind spot that the Democrats are exploiting. And again, if she wins, I guarantee you, I don't know if they'll put it on the exit poll, but they should.
It'll be a whole exit poll. I'm sure there'll be a whole special on it.
Yeah. And they'll, people will go back and unpack, how did this happen? And as you know, Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita, I think they put out 3 joint statements, which they probably put a total of 20 joint statements out. I think 3 of them have been disavowing Project 2025, but it doesn't work. It just doesn't work because the press doesn't help them on that at all.
The press doesn't help. And I think that, we probably have to go a step further. And this is for more down ballot races too. It's not enough to disavow. Like, let's go a step further and maybe be a little compassionate. Like, let's not disavow and be angry. That probably doesn't help. You kind of have, I call it like the podcast bro culture, where it's like, oh, screw you. This is what I'm going to say. It's like, no. Like, it's fine. Disavow it and then be compassionate about it. This is actually what we want to do. Like, fill the hole with something else. Is probably something that, surrogates and advocates can help do.
I think it might require Trump threatening to take the tax deduction, what's it called? The tax exempt status from the Heritage Foundation. He's going to have to do something extreme to demonstrate his distance. Kristen, you're incredibly generous to spend an hour with us. I'm very grateful to you for doing it and sharing your expertise. We hope you'll come back. Thanks to everybody for spending the hour with us. I'll be back tomorrow, 9 Eastern time, with Sean and Tim, one of whom lives in Virginia also. And we'll be here for the morning meeting. And then my PM appearance on Friday is TBD. We're going to see what the day brings. But grateful, Kristen, grateful to all of you asked questions and joined us. We'll see you again tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Have a great evening. Thank you.